Okay, so as I said, we are going to get started, guys. So this week we are doing enteral and parenteral nutrition, plus we're also finishing off some of the complex meds we didn't get through last week. So just out of interest, I don't know who was here last week when we went through heparin. Did that help going through that heparin last week? Did you all find that useful? Great, because we got through some of the insulin, but there's a few more workflows that I want to do. I'm well aware we've got some other visitors here to see the parenteral and enteral, which is what this week actually is for. So we're going to start with that, and then we'll finish off the complex meds. So if it doesn't apply to you guys, the complex stuff, you can, scoot on out of here. But for everyone else who wants to stick around for the insulin, PCAs, NICIs, and blood if we have time. That's what we'll go through after we do parenteral and enteral. Parenteral and enteral actually doesn't take too long. It's quite straightforward. So let's get going with that. First of all, I'm going to show you, let's do the enteral feed. Oh, thank you. Yeah, let's get rid of those. Oh, no, over there. Yep, I finally worked that out after how many weeks. All right, so we've talked about before when we went through orders. Remember we went through there's all different types of orders in the system. You have medications and there's patient care tasks, there's pathology, radiology, referrals. We've gone through all that. Important to note is that your feeds, your enteral feeds, are patient care tasks, which means if they're being ordered by our lovely dietitians, that means nurses, you're not going to the MAR to review those enteral feeds. They actually appear as patient care tasks. So wherever you're reviewing them, whether that's Care Compass or if you're working in those surgical, acute surgical areas or procedural areas, that might be activities and interventions. Does that make sense so far for everyone? That's not news to anyone, I hope. Parenteral is different. Parenteral is treated as a continuous infusion in the system, so that one does appear on the MAR, but we'll go through both, okay? We'll go through bolus as well as continuous for your enteral as well. So let's start. So we'll start with just doing your enteral feeds, your continuous. So when you type in enteral, you will get up the top there. We've got different orders for your adult and your pediatrics, okay? So for the sake of today, let's go ahead and choose our adult enteral feed order. So let me just get rid of this so we can have a bit closer of a look. This is where you're going to get some mandatory drop downs. So it is blank there and it's asking you to fill in those details. So whoever usually fills out your enteral feed paper form, which I'm assuming is your dietitians here, same as PA, yes? Same thing would happen. So it would be your dietitians ordering this, okay? So in the drop down, they would go ahead and choose what nutrition or feed that they were after. So let's just go ahead and say nutrition. Now this is where all the other details can go into, so your feed volumes and things like that as well. What do our bags normally come in? Thank you. So let's go ahead and go. This is all free text. There's no code sets behind it, so you can type in whatever is applicable for the order. So there's no order sentences, which you're probably used to for your medications, if that makes sense. Yeah. Frequency times, if it's just running continuous, you can write in there continuous. I think we have it built in some of our order sentences anyway, or maybe you're running it over 24 hours or whatever is your usual. Most of, I'm assuming here, you just start it and it's only until the dietitian says stop. Yeah? For your orders? Do you write a new order for every 20 hours, or is it the one order? Yeah. So that one order there, it'll be the same in the system. That one order will just keep going until the dietitian goes, okay, we don't need that anymore. And that's the same way I'll show you after. We'll just cancel and discontinue that order. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Now, this is important. Yeah. Yes. Of course. It does show up on Care Compass. I'll show you how, but it shows up in a little bit of a different way. So it shows up as a constant indicator, which means it's in the PRN section. Bear with me, I'm going to show you why. So yes, that is true. I do remember Angela over at PA, she did like the bolus workflow better, so I'll show you both. I don't know if those discussions have happened with Kelly. Brad, do you know if which one the preferred option is? Ah, well then let me not even show you this if this is not what Logan are doing. It does show up on Care Compass. It just shows up in the PRN section, so nurses don't get tasks dropped for them, which I think is what Angela kind of wanted the task to drop as a prompt. Whereas for your nurses, you're probably all used to your Care Compass or your PRN orders. So think of things like your wound care and thing. Remember when I went through and I said if you choose them as PRN, because we don't have a set time that we would do our wound care, we just want it sitting there to remind us. That's the way the continuous feeds were built the same way. So they would sit there to say, this patient's got this going, but there's no task to say, go ahead and say you've done this. Obviously, dietitians have asked that those tasks are dropping as a bit of a prompt for nurses. It all makes sense. Let me just go through and show you this. All right, so we're going to choose the bolus adult. And the reason it's a little bit different is because, see how that frequency is now a drop down? So that means now those tasks will drop based off the frequency that the dietitians choose, whereas the continuous didn't have a frequency, it was just sitting there all the time. Okay, so let's just go ahead and put in what we were doing before. I beg your pardon, didn't know we were doing it a little bit different here, that's all good. Frequency times, what are we choosing for your workflow? You check them every 4 hours. That's fine, let's just do for the sake of it, we'll do the same thing anyway on the other side. Your flush instructions, so every 4 hours? Yeah. How many mils? 40 mils. Now let's go 4th hourly. If you wanted to start at a different time, it's all the same as your patient care orders that you do for anything else, this OEF. Rate, so we started off, should we go 20? Doesn't matter, 42, whatever. Route, so however you're administering this feed, so whether it's through a PEG, whatever, so we'll go ahead and say PEG for this one. Your delivery method, so this is whether it's continuous. So this is, I'm assuming, if it was truly bolus, where you're doing your gravities, where you do a bolus, you choose bolus. And if it's continuous, we're going for continuous, yes? Thank you. Equipment, gravity, pump, syringe, all your usual ways that you administer. I'm going to go pump for this one. So let's go ahead and sign that off. Correct, they are not mandatory. So whatever you would normally order on that piece of paper, whatever you want the nurses to see face up, you would be putting it there. Any of your special instructions will also show up. So if there's any other details you want to communicate to the nurses or any other clinicians, I'd be putting it in that special instructions. Yes, there are orders in the system separately. Is that why? Because there's an order? Beautiful, let's do that now. So, we were just talking about the flushes. There is a separate order for it. So see how when I ordered the bolus, it was just a free text, which means it would just show up in the comments on that order on Care Compass. Whereas if I ordered it separately as the order as a flush, then that's going to generate its own orders for your Care Compass, your own task to say, have you done your flush? And that requires the nurses to say, yes, no, I've done it. Let's just go quick. Oh, I wish I chose the... Let's go 4th hourly. Duration. Okay, so we've got 2 orders there. Let's jump into Care Compass. Now, this all works the same way as all your other orders, that as soon as there's a new order on your patient, you get that yellow box appearing around your patient's name for all the nurses in the room and midwives. So when you go into this one, it's going to tell you, that's a lie. It will tell you that you've got new orders. So this is an order I placed earlier on this patient. I will double check, but they should also come through. Any patient care, any new orders will all pull through to here. Okay, just like everything else does. So we're looking at our Care Compass task list. So for those in the room that don't know, this is where the nurses will do all their tasks. This is like their time planner of what they've got due. So they've got their enteral feed bolus there, sitting there, telling them how much, the rate, and that it's through the PEG. And then you've also got your flush as well. So based off how often you choose it, that's when those tasks will drop. So I can see there my tube flushes are dropping every 4 hours because I chose that order. So if you want that order to drop separately, you need to place that separate order for the flush, which sounds like is the preferred workflow that you've gone for. Yeah. Is this all making sense so far, nurses in the room? So as soon as the dietitians have ordered, this is how you're going to see it. You're going to see your enteral feed, and then you're going to see your flushes separately every 4 hours. Now, the Care Compass works exactly the same way, and the beauty of it is that when we go in, let's find our first one. So when we select it, before I go on, if a dietitian has ordered it the other way using the other order, it sits in PRN continuous. That was the only difference. And I think the concern at the PA was that potentially that could be missed, and they wanted to be prompting them to go and check their feeds and things like that. So you will, as of at Logan, you will see it, and Beaudesert, no doubt, you will see it in your activities dropping at certain times, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and select that one. Like I said, the beauty of using your Care Compass task is that as soon as you hit document, it's going to take you to the exact place in interactive view that you need to document. Okay, because it is quite, we always talking about it, it's quite confusing. iView, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of options you can document beside, so that's why it's important to use those orders that are generated from Care Compass, because it's linked all in the back end and tells you this is where you need to document for this order. Okay, this is saying that I haven't yet inserted the tube, so I've said I'm going to give this via PEG, and the PEG hasn't actually been documented in iView yet. So hopefully this would already be done. As soon as that PEG goes in, whoever puts it in, it's their responsibility to put that in the system in iView. So the way we do that, it's called the dynamic group. You've seen it when we do IV cannulas and everything else. It's all the same way. So you're coming through, it's going to ask you what type you're putting in. Percutaneous, endogastrostomy, abdo wall. You can put in the size. You should put in the size. And then this is all the information that goes together with that PEG. So all your usuals, you've flushed it, the site looks fine, it's nice and clean, it's dry. And then down the bottom, this is where all your enteral tube intake's going to go. So anything you enter here, what did we say it was going? How many mils an hour? I forgot. 20. So if I go through and for the hour I'm saying 20 mils has gone through, and I sign that one off, that 20 mils has gone to my fluid balance chart. Okay, and I'll show you that now. Your flush is also linked to your fluid balance chart. So when you put in and say, well, I've also done my 40 mil flush, and I sign that in, and then I'm going to my fluid balance. There's my intakes there for that tube. Does that make sense? So if you do it back the other way, it will talk back the other way like everything else. So if for some reason you want to enter it from the fluid balance chart, it's going to pull back through to the iView. That make sense? Any questions for the bolus? Yes. Correct, yeah, so that's the task. So if we go back to Care Compass and we refresh that, which is why it's so important that for the nurses in the room you start from Care Compass. Because if you go, so you'll notice that last one's gone, because if you go straight into the chart, and I know I've mentioned this and I keep drumming it into you all, if you go straight into the chart and go, well, I know where this is documented, I'm just going to go and document, and you don't start from Care Compass and select document, it doesn't drop off. The system doesn't know that that task is done then. If you have done it in the back end, so you've gone in, you're already in the chart, and you're like, I've already documented, I happen to be near fluid balance chart, so I thought I'd just document it while I was there. What you need to do is you come back to Care Compass, and you need to manually tell it then that I've done that task, so everyone else knows as well. So you'll just hit done. Make sense? Does that last bit make sense with the tasks? Yeah? Everyone's really quiet today. Some are nodding, some are... So when you have tasks on your Care Compass, or when you're about to do any sort of care in the system, the first thing you should do is start from your Care Compass to see if there's an order. If there's an order there, hit document. It's going to take you to where you need to go. As soon as you've documented one thing on that, that task drops off. If you're already in the chart and you just decide to document it and you know you've got a task due, you just need to go back and manually say that you've done it. Yeah? Yes. Yes. Yeah. So what goes into the fluid balance chart is manual. So whatever your workflow that you've decided for Logan, so if we're going to do those bolus, if we're choosing that bolus order where it requires a frequency, we would need to consider how often we want that to drop. So whether you do it hourly, so if the nurses are used to documenting their feeds hourly, is that what, if it's a continuous, would you go in and say, well, every hour they've had 20 mils? Nurses in the room that do the feeds? This is probably something we need to double check with some of our project leads to make sure that so it's consistent. Did they tell you in training out of interest? Ah, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah. No. So that's why so that's why when we start, it's normally the continuous order we use because there's no manual need for the nurses to go and document against a task because it just sits there. So it would sit. Can I show you how it looks? No. So nothing goes to the fluid balance chart unless the nurses manually enter it. Perfect. Perfect. That's actually quite a good. So let's show you what that looks like. So what we'll do is we'll confirm this. It sounds like you guys already know what you're doing. Nurses, you'll just be documenting whenever the task appears. It's going to be the same regardless. It just may differ how many times it appears on your care compass. But that sounds like best case scenario, that it only appears at midnight, and that's when you update all your totals to say what you've done or how much has gone through. Yeah. We need to confirm this though, I think, and I might just send out some additional communications to say this is the workflow, this is what will go in on the order, just so everyone's clear. Yes. When they're doing the fluid balance chart, it's up to whatever you normally do. You don't have to, so if you're one of the nurses that wait till the end of the infusions and then you document the final volume, continue on. If you're not one of those where you document every hour, then you can do that as well. Yeah, it varies everywhere. So there's nothing mandatory in the system that's going to limit you to doing whatever you normally do. Yeah. Yes, question. I see what you mean. So you wouldn't normally document on the fluid balance chart? Okay, that's fine. As long as you document in iView, it's just that extra level because it's going to pull through anyway. You don't have to manually, but as long as then you're filling out your iView documentation, which is where most nurses are living and breathing with their documentation, it's just an added that it happens to be going on the fluid balance chart as well. Yeah, but you don't have to do both. You don't have to go into iView, document what you're doing, and then go into fluid balance chart and document. It just happens to be pulling all across. It's just an FYI. If you're wondering how that got to your fluid balance chart, the system automatically pulls it in. Yes, you can. Yeah, yeah. So when they place the order, there are start times. That is a good question because a lot of them are in between those regimes that they have. So there are start times there that they can say, don't start this order. So it'll be 4th hourly, but don't start it till this time. If it's like on a certain regime like that where you're kind of bolusing, then those frequencies need to reflect whatever the regime is. Does that make sense? So you know where I showed you that so I wouldn't worry too much because the dietitians will be over this. So this frequency, so this is where they would match that to whatever the regime. So it's dropping on your task at the time that it's due. So you need to do the feed, for example, at lunchtime. So the lunchtime one will drop. It's all pulling from that frequency. Does that make sense? Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. So that's And in the system, are you putting a stop time on that order, or you are putting a stop time? You've did right. Oh, yep. Okay. So in the special instructions down here. So one order though, one order continues in the system, so it's just there. And what happens if you're increasing rates? You're doing a, yeah, is that Brad, yeah? Cool. Does that make sense for everyone in the room? Yes. Yeah. It's yeah. Can we take this offline? Because it sounds like there's some ongoing discussion still happening with this workflow that may have differed since I've last looked at it. I actually might meet with a couple of you, and then next one we'll touch base and revisit this one just to so everyone, because as change champions you need to be over this, so we might revisit it next, the enteral fees and how they're going to look for the nurses, what we decide, okay? Is that all right with everyone? Just because I don't want to confuse everyone. Let's move on. But at least you know where the documentation, your IV documentation is. It does pull through to full bounce chart automatically. And you do need to put in your wherever it's going into, so your PEG and things, which is your dynamic group, which you're probably hopefully all used to. Yeah? Okay. Let's do our parenteral. Is there any other questions, or is there any other with enteral feeds other than that little, the way it appears on Care Compass, how we're going to make sure that task appears? No other questions? All right. Let's do your parenteral nutrition. So there is a power plan that exists. Now there are some updates to this one as well, because I believe you at Logan use a different type of TPN. Yes. So there is a power plan. Remember last week we went through what is a power plan. For those that were here, we talked about heparin. So a power plan is essentially a group of orders. There's also, it allows us to put more decision support behind it and more reference text. So you'll notice if you haven't seen one before, there's a whole lot of writing that goes along with it. So we use power plans for when we want to convey more information about whatever we're trying to administer, which is why we use them for heparin based off statewide guidelines. So TPN, there's also some instructions around, so whoever's ordering it gives them a bit of a guide. Now, let me move this back over. So whoever normally orders your TPN remains the same. So whoever's doing that now will do it in the system, okay? For the nurses in the room, that will not be you, no doubt. And if we scroll down, so all these orders go together with whatever you'd normally do for your TPN. So your blood sugar monitoring, all those patient care tasks that go together with a patient having TPN, they're all built into the power plan. And so it's up to whoever's ordering it that they're making sure they're selecting what they need. Some of these are default ticked, like our blood glucose monitoring. For those that are ordering this power plan, I would strongly encourage that they check to make sure that they haven't already got some of these patient care tasks already happening, okay, because you don't want double up. For your TPN, actually you may have some patients that already have blood glucose monitoring happening for fourth hourly. So rather than placing another order on Care Compass, we just ask that they go to Care Compass first and double check what the patient's already got. Likewise with your subcutaneous dose check that we went through last week with insulin. Yes, seeing some nods, you know what I'm talking about. All right, your weights are all in there as well. So they'll all generate tasks. They'll go to Care Compass. The bit that we're really interested in is we're going to go ahead and order the actual continuous infusion. Pathology and radiology orders are also in this power plan. So it's all grouped together in the one place to make sure that no one forgets anything when they're ordering their TPN. So let's go ahead. Now, all these bags in here, in this power plan, what you used, you will not see there. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you're using some FK, something. I even wrote it down. So I know there's been a lot of work in getting, you will eventually see this TPN type that you use at this facility in this power plan. Okay, this is a mock domain that I'm using at the moment, so you don't see it at the moment, but it will eventually go in. In the meantime, there is a workaround to get that TPN bag that you're used to seeing into this power plan. And we kind of touched on it last week when we were talking about heparin, but anytime you want to add something to a power plan, rather than using this add button up here, because that creates a whole nother order, you're going to use this add to phase. Okay, so what that means is that's going to add an order to this particular power plan. So when we go in and say add to phase, and this is where, now let me have a look, see how are we spelling this, FKC. I can't remember if we put a TPN at the start of this. Maybe I don't have it in this domain. That's right, isn't it? You're using FKC014A. Yeah. Meantime, to order, you will need to parenteral. Yeah, that's a shame. I don't know if I've got it in this. So we are using our... We can do a little search. No, I don't think we've got it in here yet. You haven't all been ordering it in training yet either, have you? There's no other name it goes by, is there? Yeah, we will, but there should be, we will double check, it should be in there as a separate order that you will add to phase. Let's just go ahead and choose one of these ones out of interest, so everyone remember what I'm going to choose. Don't even know if it's, let's do this Olimel. I am logged in as a nurse at the moment, so if you're a prescriber and you're allowed to order this, then you're not going to get this. So what this does, this is your normal order sentences, and what it's going to do is it's going to add that order to this power plan. Okay, so let's just go through and fill in our rest of our details before I do that. Yeah, that's fine. Rate, 40, 80, 40, sounds good. Oh, that's a lie. 40 mils an hour. Your volume's probably 2-litre bags, these big ones. We'll do that, just so I can show you what it looks like. This is saying how often do you want to order your blood glucose monitoring. So usually it's the 4-hourly one, so we'll go ahead and do our 4th hourly. So the doctors are ordering this all at the same time. Yes, that's fine. So some of those other things that were popping up, they're all for your patient care tasks. So there are other things like line care, things like that. Normally our messaging is to doctors is just to be mindful of when they are doing patient care tasks, because there is potential to really clog up that care compass with all these extra tasks. So absolutely need to order the product and any of those mandatories that go with it. Make sure your blood glucose is there. But some of the other things like line care and things like that, the nurses probably already have tasks already on their care compass for a lot of that. Or you would let them make the task to remind them when they want to do their line care. It's not something that goes hand in hand with your TPN that the doctors are used to ordering or anyone else for that. Does that make sense? Because otherwise you could end up with a lot of things on your care compass and you're like, who has put this all there? And I was already doing half of this stuff. Alright, so parenteral nutrition goes to your MAR because it's treated as a continuous infusion. So this is where it's going to be similar to our heparin that we covered last week. So we have our order there, and then we've got our pending task. So it's treated all like your IV fluids, the same thing. So when you're ready to begin that bag, you're going to select on your pending task. It's going to ask you to put in your site just like it does all the time with all continuous infusions. You'll say your central line or whatever else. I hope it's a central line. Witness by, your 2 nurse checks as per usual. I'm sure it's the same here. Your 2 nurse checks go in here, so you put in your witness nurse there as well. Let's do it. No, that's a lie. So I'll put in my 2 nurse checks. We've got that rates running at 40 mils. You're doing all your checks, you're hanging it, and we're signing that off to say we've started. This is the secondary nurse witness's signature it's asking for. We refresh that, and so now it's saying that that bag has been begun at 14:03. Okay. Yeah, sure. So for the mass summary, it will appear like this. Is this how we're, so do you not have access to the MAR at all? Not even a read-only? Yeah, right. I'm just going to touch base with you after that. Okay, cool. That's fine. So if you're used to reviewing it from the mass summary, that's fine. That's where you're reviewing all your medications there. And then for the nurses, it's the same. So when you're, sorry? Yes, it will come up on the more. If you like to do your medications from the more, it will come up there. So let me just show you. So remember, your more shows all your, and you would be using your scanner. Your more shows everything that's due now, an hour back, an hour forward, any PRNs, and any continuous. So you can do that. Just be mindful that you will need to come into this. So if we select this one here, and you need to double click that field over there to get that administration window that you see from the MAR. Let me just get out of that. Now, do you order your bags? I've just added another bag. Do you order your TPN bag by bag? But it's always one order equals, you have to have an order for every bag that's hanging. It's not one of a continuous infusions where it's one bag and it just keeps going. It's not like your enteral feeds, for example, where it's just one order and it just keeps going. Great. Okay, so that makes it easier for all the nurses in the room, and that's the same as PA. So for all your infuse amounts, it's the same way that you do your fluids and any other continuous infusions. So when you're ready to say that I'm infusing so much, whether you do that hourly again or whether you do that when the bag's finished, that's your local policy, whatever you do. So let's just go ahead and say, okay, well, thousands, I'm going home for the day, I better put in my infused volumes. So it's exactly the same way you do any other infusion. You're saying 1,000's been infused, we sign that one off, that goes to your fluid balance chart. So I'll show you what that looks like in the fluid balance chart. There's our 1,000. So it's exactly, so enteral, patient care task, you'll do all your documentation in iView, will still all pull through to your fluid balance chart. Parenteral, you'll do from the MAR, and that one, again, treat it like any other infusion and it goes through to your fluid balance chart. Does that make sense? When your bag is finished and you want to end it, exactly the same way as how you do your fluids. You're using your end bag task. Does that make sense? Pretty straightforward. It's very like all your other continuous meds on your MAR. Does that make sense from dietitian, allied health point of view? Yes. To say that it's stopped? No, so it won't pull because it's a manual entry of how much is infused to pull through to the fluid balance chart. So if it stops for 3 hours, what I would recommend the nurses be doing is that they make a comment with that, where is my, so they make a comment together with that to say that that's been put on hold, but nothing's changing on the fluid balance chart because it's a manual entry of the infused amount. So you just won't see any updates from that. So if it was going, if they happen to be entering, I'm not saying you have to, but if you were entering your infused volumes every hour, if there was a gap of 3 hours, then you know that they probably stopped it. But if you, but otherwise, yeah, it's a manual process. Nothing automatically goes to the fluid balance chart. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? So where I would be recommending, where is my, is in this comments section. This is routinely where we use for those types of things at the PAs. You'd be saying, you know, maybe patient went for x-ray, pump put on hold. Does that make sense? Yeah. Correct. So they would need to do something with that task. So they might want to document against that task, say patient was absent. Or if the patient's planning on coming back soon, they might leave that task there, and as soon as the patient comes back, they'll do the flush. Yeah. So the task will just go red to say, because if it's been over an hour, it'll just say red, and it'll just sit there saying, you know, this patient needs this flush, which is probably what you want. So they're prompted that when they get back, they get their flush. And it's the exact same workflow. Yeah. Good question. Any other questions with Enteral? So apologies that workflow has somewhat changed since I've last seen it, so we will update, double check how those enterals are, particularly around the frequency and how they appear on Care Compass for the nurses. So I will clarify that and send out some communications. Parenteral, I will also confirm, I'm 99% positive that that order exists. It's just, I think it's a glitch in our domain system, but that add to phase is how they will continue to do find your TPN. Nursing side, it will appear the same way, so that doesn't even matter for you guys. It will all just look the same when it appears on your MAR. Sorry? How long till it gets into that power plan? I actually don't know unless Brad knows, but there's a lot of optimization. There's a whole structure, so we'd have to sit somewhere in that. We can see if we can find out roughly, and I think Aaron, one of our project reps, may have an idea because he's been working on this power plan to get that in. It has been approved. Sorry? Ooh, that might be good. We won't promise anything. I also wasn't aware of that yet, but that is good news if we get it for Go Lives. If we don't get it for Go Live, you'll use the add to phase workflow. Yeah, it's not a bad thing. You'd be training everyone in add to phase and making sure they understand it, because that would be, you know, plan B, whereas plan A is obviously. Add to phase absolutely will be there, yep, but whether when it gets actually put into the power plan, so on default it's there, I don't have a date for that. Question? Yes? It's from an allied health point of view, do you mean, or nursing? So in terms of like a note, do you mean? It would be up to, so generally the principle with documentation around the nursing side of things is that we document by exception. So if there's a place to document it in iView, then that's where we're heading with an electronic system. That if there's a field for it, if you document it there's no need to double up and document a note as well. It does depend on the nurse though. If you find that, you know, this little free text field isn't enough to say what actually happened, then that would be those exceptions where we would say you would need to be doing a note. No, well, nowhere in a system do we like to double document. That kind of defeats the point of an electronic system. So if there's room in iView and there's a applicable field there, that's where they'll document, so they won't do the note. If there's not enough and they think that that's one of those exceptions that it needs more explaining around, that's when they'll do the note. Some wards do, it would be just variable about where you're working, because some wards, there is no general, we can't tell them how to, if some of the nurses love to document, they're all about their registration just in case, you know what nurses are like. So some will document a story and that could continue. Others, provided it's documented somewhere in the system, that could be enough. So there is no hard and fast, I can't. Yeah. No, there's no prompt to put in the comment, but there's no prompt to put on paper either. So nurses, you'll find, are pretty good with their workflows and they know their scope of practice. If there's something that they need to document, if anything, nurses over-document. We've done it, we've always done it. And you'll find that when we go live, most of this, if most staff will continue with their notes because it's their safety. And even at PA, we're still continuing with notes, but more and more we're getting people documenting in the fields that are designed in iView because it generates other information. And if you enter it in iView, it may pull into other sections. So there is a little bit of a, we do encourage it that if there is somewhere in iView, you do document it because it will pull through to other areas. It may pull through to a note for a template, it may pull through to the fluid balance chart. So we do strongly encourage the note would be the extra. Yeah. Is that in line with what the nurses in the room are thinking? Yeah? You'll see as we go along, some nurses will continue with that AM shift, PM shift, night shift, but if you're not seeing it there, all clinicians, it's a good point because all clinicians need to know how to find that information. So allied health, if nurses are using iView, you need to know how to use iView as well and know where to find your fluid balance chart and things like that, because it might be that's where the nurses are documenting it. But certainly in the future, it'll be iViews where we're pushing all staff to be documenting in. That makes sense before we move on to complex? Yeah? Sorry guys, so if you've got other things to do, you're more than welcome to disappear. Do I have all of you guys on my distribution list? So when we do send out the formal, this is the workflow, if I send one, you'll distribute. Sorry, what was your name? Emma, I've got you on the list. Okay, and then you can send out to everyone. Thank you. Brad, can I get you and Kelly to touch base with Emma just to confirm what that workflow is so then we can work that out? All right, let's move on to the rest of our complex meds. Bum, bum, bum. All right, so we got through last week, we did heparin. Everyone feel kind of comfortable, more comfortable than what they did when they did training with heparin. Then we did a bit of insulin, regular insulin ordering. So I showed you what it looks like for a prescriber and then what it looks like on the MAR. And we went through some of those subcutaneous dose check orders and what that looks like and the point of those. Man, the time goes so quick. I'm going to quickly show you the insulin infusion. So your IV insulin infusion. So it's very similar to your heparin one. So it should make a lot of sense for you all. So when they order insulin, a power plan, and they might put IV because that will help, your power plans appear. So there is one for adult and there is one for pediatrics because they differ slightly. So let's go ahead and we'll just choose the adult at the top. So again, all based off statewide guidelines. There is reference text in here. Any of those medications that go hand in hand with ordering an IV insulin infusion are all there as well. So your glucose, they normally order a pre-hour glucose or just in case. That's all included in the power plan as well. Again, all these patient care tasks are there. The only one that is default ticked is that blood glucose monitoring. All these other ones, like I always say, it would probably be the nurse that would be ordering them themselves to say, I need to do line care on this patient or I need to do something like that. So they aren't default ticked. Midwives in the room, you have your full labour phase there as well. Important to point out. So your fluids are also there as well. So all your glucose fluids that go hand in hand with your insulin infusions. And I think, yes, we even have our comments to say this must be given by Y-site. So all those, that as per our policy and procedures, are all built into those orders. So let's go ahead so we've got our Act Rapid 50 units and 50 mils. I'm going to also order some, let's just go ahead and order some fluids as well so you can... So doctors, prescribers, again, sorry, I'm in as a nurse, so the doctors don't have to do this. I just can't be bothered to change users. Great. So this is saying I need a weight on my patient because I have been slack and don't have a weight. So that's some of the discern you're going to see going, wait a minute, you haven't put a weight on your patient. It can't be signed off until a weight is put on that patient. Okay, the reason being with a lot of our continuous infusions, if that wasn't mandatory and the nurses went forward and you put in a weight after the fact, it may change the rate of the infusion and the concentrations and things like that, which is a huge no-no, which is why the doctors can't get past ordering it unless there's a weight put in the system. Okay? Doesn't really matter for everyone else in the room. It just means that the doctors, you may get doctors coming and asking you, what was the weight on that patient, or can you do a weight on that patient, because they need it in order to be able to do this. Might help if I put in kilos. So now it goes, yeah, I'm happy. Continue on. So just like our TPN and our heparin, it appears as a continuous infusion. Now this is where it differs a little bit to your TPN that we just went to. This is like the truly bottomless order. So we normally get one order of insulin. They don't keep ordering it every time you need to replace a syringe. There's just one order, and when the syringe is finished, we go ahead and put another syringe in. So it's the same way in the system, okay? So if that syringe is finished, you don't need another order. It's still the same order. So which means you're not using your end bag functionality because there is no end syringe as such. There's no task. You would just continually put up another bag. So sorry, that was really poorly explained on my behalf. Let me just show you what I mean. So let's go ahead and start this. Now, the rates, as we know, are based off whatever the BSL is, and there's a whole scale that goes with it. If you're in this window and you want to see what that scale is, it's a right-click on the order up the top. You're going to go into Order Info. You go into Comments, and this is where it appears. So this is where it's telling you if your BSL was, let's say it was 10.2, then I need to give 2 units. Okay? So if I go back, If you do, and I should have done this the other way around, if you do it the other way around, if you put that in first, then it will put it into the rate automatically. So when you go to put in your rates, always do the bottom one first, because then it will automatically pull in, which I didn't actually do. Now, like I showed you the last time, remember I showed you guys eye view and that little medication infusion section? Same thing. You can use that for your insulin as well, wherever I find it. So now it appears, because there actually is an infusion, there's a tick to say that there's been information documented against it. So that's what it looks like in this field here. So your 2 mils or 2 units, and it converts it to your units. You can do the same thing from here. You can change the rates from here, and it talks back to the MAR. The reason it's quite handy to do it from here is because you can pull in your vital signs as well, and that's where your blood glucose is. So if I went through, let's say, what did I say what the last one was? 10.2. And maybe now it's come down and now it's 7. So I've done, it's the next hour, it's saying it's 7, so now I need to go and adjust my rate. So what you can do is you can actually right click on this and you can go chart details, and what it does is it opens up that window for you, the same window you would get on the MAR. What we have found at previous sites is they prefer this because you can see that correlation between the BSL and the rate, whereas if you do it from the MAR, you don't necessarily get that. So this is probably the preferred method for your insulin infusions. So like I said, actually I don't even know what I said, 7.1 was it? 7. Comments. And our 7 is 0.5 units. So we come in here, we're going to do a rate change, and we're going to say now I'm doing 0.5. Your witness by, your second nurse check, that all continues. So your 2 nurses check the order, they check the pump, they change it, and you're good to go. So if I go in, that's definitely wrong. Fine. Now, oh shivers, sorry, my bad. That little section there that you've got to select apply first in those windows. The reason they want you to apply is because you can do a couple of actions in that window. So you could be changing the rate, plus you could say an infuse and volume at the same time. That's why it's asking you to say apply. I've been doing this for how many years and I still don't press apply, but you learn the hard way like I just did. LGRN5. Apply. This is my secondary nurse witness, and that changes. The other thing I want to show you, so now you can see the trends. So you can see you've got your 10.2, and it was 2, it was running at 2 units, then it dropped to 7, now it's going at 0.5. The other thing that's very handy is your diabetes and endocrine band. So this kind of just summarizes that. The doctors didn't like looking at that medication infusion section. They didn't like all the extra fields and all the extra noise. So we went ahead and created a whole new band for them, so it's nice and it just cuts out all that noise and it just shows them the infusion and what the BSLs are. So if you find it easier to look at it that way, you can see it like that. The reason you can't see the 2 doses that I've done, if you're wondering why I did 2 and I can only see 1 there, it's because I did them within the same time period, and because this window is showing me over the hour, I actually did 2 doses within the hour. I changed the rate within the hour. So you probably wouldn't see that, I hope, because you'll be doing it every hour. So you will see all of them automatically. If I change that to, I actually think I did it almost within the minute. I actually think I even did it within 10. Oh no, I didn't do it within 10. So you have to break that out to be able to see the both. But you shouldn't have that problem because you'll be doing them every hour. Does that make sense? Has everyone seen that diabetes and endocrine band before? Yeah, it's not news. Correct. The insulin workflow is actually it's quite straightforward. Is there any questions about the insulin, IV insulin? Yes. No. So the medication infusions band will be there for all medications that are titratable. Okay, so anything where it's built in the system where we know that you're constantly titrating it, so that's why your heparin is a titratable infusion, so you'll see that in there, like your GTN and Oxytocin. That one's all right? Does that matter? Clearly no midwife over here. Whoopsie, I didn't actually add that. Oxytocin. You said this one. Is that something you would normally titrate, Jodie? Oh, probably is, isn't it? Yeah, right. I can check, normalize. Ooh. Yep. Phew. I was like, I don't know, I need to check this. So you could use that one for that workflow as well. Yes. Oh, good.
When we go into MAR and we do a DD,
Oh, yes.
and we're writing it up in the DD book as per normal,
Yeah.
and with 2 witnesses sign the book,
Yeah.
do we have to still put in a witness when it comes up the system as witness?
It depends on what you do on the ward. Do you sign the medication chart 2 signatures? Then you'd sign in the system 2 signatures. You would sign in the system 2 signatures. So we haven't put any mandatories on any of these administrations, so it's all governed by whatever your local policy and procedure. The reason for that is it is a statewide system, and for a very good example of this is that the PA actually don't have 2 nurses sign on the medication chart, whereas you guys do here at the Logan. So if you do that on whatever you do on a medication paper chart, in terms of witnessing, you do in the system.
PA signs 2 witnesses on the paper chart, but they don't sign 2 witnesses on the computer in MAR.
No, PA only sign 1 on the med chart. Absolutely only 1.
Where I work.
If it is where you work, that's fine. If it's a local thing, and so that's, yeah, so if some areas, and I think Bow Desert's another example of this, some of their ED stuff, they don't do 2 nurses, so it's all just governed by wherever you're working. Yeah. Any other questions with the insulin? If you're going to stop the pump, if you need to put it, we probably should talk about this, shouldn't we? If you need to put that pump on hold, I know we talked about it with heparin, so maybe the insulin's dropped right, the blood glucose has dropped right off, and let's go and find. So this suspend insulin infusion. So you need to change that rate the same way we did with the heparin to 0 mils an hour. Does anyone need me to show you that? Or does that kind of make sense from? So all it is that when you come into here and you go into your chart details, if you've stopped that pump, you need to tell the system you've stopped it, and you need to make sure that everyone else knows you've stopped it by putting that 0 in. So if you see a 0 anywhere on a continuous infusion, it means it's not going. So it means it's stopped. Does that make sense? If you're working in theatres, and particularly important if patients are coming in around with their insulin infusions, if for whatever reason you're stopping it, you need to reflect that into the chart as well. I don't think we've got any peri up in here anyway, but just pretend they were here. You all heard it. And as soon as it started again, we changed the rate. Everything else is as per the protocol. So, you're rechecking your BSLs. If it's fallen below here, you need to do that. All those actions, exactly the same as what they are. There are actually smarts within the system where it will alert you to say if you've had 2 of your BSLs in that high range, you actually get the same alert saying you need to go and call a doctor. So there is some little extra functionality, but in terms of the protocol, it's all the same. And let me just double check. I just want to see what our reference text that we have to go with this. Page not found. I don't know what that is. I'll confirm. So a lot of our, just like with our heparin infusion that I showed you last week, that little box means there's reference text. Because I'm in a mock domain, it's probably not linked up, but it was working with the heparin one. So when you clicked that one, it opened up the heparin infusion form. So if you just wanted a little bit of extra clarification. So wherever you see that symbol, that means there's something that attached to this power plan for extra information. I'm pretty sure we had the insulin protocol in there somewhere, but I don't think it's working. That's why I can't get to it. Does that make sense? I really want to do PCAs and Nikki's. We always run out of time. There's always a lot to get through. Do we want to leave that one till next week? I know it's 2:30 already and I've just slammed you with a whole lot of information. So that means next week. That's all right. Oh, I know what I wanted to show you. Nah, that's all right. We'll do it next week. So next week I need to go through pathology and radiology is kind of quick. We'll go through some of the rules around it, some of the things that you must do or else your pathology is not going to get processed. We'll go through some of that. But we will have time to finish off with PCAs, Nickies, and I want to do PBS scripts because the last week, we've only got 2 sessions to go, shock horror. The last week I've organised for devices. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to get vital sign machine, ECG machine, printers. We'll set them up in here and you can come and have a play. And when you hit send, it will pull through the chart, all that fun stuff. We'll do that on the last week so you're all, because take my word for it, when we go live, devices are always majority of our calls to the command centre. You know, I've hit send and it's not coming through. You know what I'm talking about because you've been going around the devices, no doubt. But we'll go through some of those ins and outs because your colleagues, it's frustrating when they're not working and half the time it's just they're quite intricate about the steps you take to get that set of vital signs, for example, into the system. Yeah, so we'll go through that in the last week. But next week, pathology, radiology. Thank you, everyone. Apologies about that enteral feed workflow. We'll get that one sorted for you. Oh, yes.